So the self-improvement community has a lot of book recommendations for young men. 48 Laws of Power, Atomic Habits, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The 4-Hour Workweek. There is a ton to get through, and all of those books are acclaimed for a reason and they will help you. But they seem to forget fiction. Fiction is seen as something that does not have any value by most people in the self-improvement community. That is just straight up wrong. You know how I built this physique? Through the inspiration of books like these. The lessons and inspiration you can get through reading fiction is unparalleled. The book recommendations of the self-improvement community teach you specific things. There is much value in going into the minutia of that. But this is seeing all those things in practical application of other people's lives, albeit in a very entertaining, fantastical world. If you want to learn more about how fiction has inspired me along my self-improvement journey and some actionable steps it can teach you to better yourself, please check out my hero's journey video after this one. But in this video, I'll be going over stories that have shaped me as a kid and our stories that have changed me as a young man. These are the stories that have turned me into the man I am today and have inspired my self-improvement journey while teaching me a ton of invaluable life lessons. But let's start off with the honorable mentions. These are books that either impacted me when I was younger and are technically young adult, but I believe have value for anybody at any age. And then we have the books that have not significantly impacted me, but have significantly impacted others and I believe are of great value to young men. Speaking of that, we have Dune. This is actually Children of the Dune. I don't have a physical copy of the first book. Dune is a story about Paul Atreides and political warfare across the galaxy. This is a fight for power, and Paul has to have a coming of age in a brutal reality. Dune was written in a different time period than we are in and teaches a lot of lessons that are lost in the modern age, such as learning to control your emotions to your advantage, along with conquering fear and finding what your true meaning of life is. These sound very generic, but the way Dune turns it into essentially a magic system and a prophetic fate for our main character is extremely interesting when mixed with all the political machinations of the world. This is a vast story and quite a difficult read, so if you haven't read a book in a while, I'd suggest starting with some of the other ones, but it does make the honorable mentions just simply because of how impactful this is and how revolutionary this story has been for stories such as Star Wars and pretty much any other sci-fi story. But speaking of sci-fi stories, we have Ender's Game. Ender's Game is a great exploration into dealing with pressure and expectations as a gifted child or young adult. Ender is exactly that. He is pretty damn smart in everything he does and succeeds at levels that people do not expect him to, and dealing with the opposition that comes with that, along with the moral quandaries and conundrums like selective breeding and genocide. Because in Ender's world, Earth is at war with an alien species. Earth has already been attacked twice, and the military has taken to selectively breeding geniuses that can combat these forces. The weight that Ender has on his shoulders of being one of the last hopes of Earth. Yes, this is not the same as your parents expecting you to have all A's, but the emotions of dealing with pressure and rising to the occasion are all the same. Ender's Game is another sci-fi classic of which I do highly recommend, and it's not really young adult. Yes, it has kids, but it's pretty damn dark. The next three books were hugely impactful to my childhood and all share similar themes of coming of age and finding your place in the world with their unique takes and different pressures upon the main characters. We have The Ranger's Apprentice, Percy Jackson, and my beat-ass copy of Aragon. Even though these books are young adult, they hold up incredibly well to be read at any age, and as you go further in the series, they become more mature. These are some of my highest recommendations, especially if you're looking for something that's a bit easier to read and you don't have to devote a ton of attention like these guys. These books are amazing. Aragon can be brutally described as Star Wars in a fantastical world. Percy Jackson is essentially Harry Potter, but in America. But instead of owls and wizards, you have Greek gods. And Ranger's Apprentice was essentially if special forces was in medieval times and recruited teenagers. As our last honorable mention, I have a manga called Berserk. This is my first ever manga, but I can tell you, this is the man's manga. This is the manga when you got hair on your chest and your voice starts getting gravelly. I'm really just kidding, but so far I can already see the implications this story has. And because of how loved it is, I can give this recommendation already. It is fucking dark. If you don't want to be depressed, don't read this. There's some fucked up shit that happens, and I'm barely into the story. But so far, some of the lessons I can glean from Berserk are going to your absolute lowest point and continuing to fight. The common phrase put around the community is to struggle on. They call themselves strugglers, and I think that embodies this perfectly. Because in this fucked up world, a lot of fucked up shit happens, but Guts just does not give up. I think the quote that he said was, "I'd rather fight for my life than live it." And that just goes so fucking hard. How can you not get motivated by this? Also, so far in the story, I can clearly see that he is working towards his initial goal, but he has lost his path, his initial reason of why he's going about this. I love when stories take this angle because sometimes you are going about things moving like an automaton towards the direction that you think is what you want, but you realize you lost your purpose for it along the way. Overall, I am excited to continue reading Berserk and see how this story impacts my life. You can check out my full thoughts on the first little bit of it in another video that I posted. Now, all of these next books are classified as adult fantasy, and I've read as an adult in my life, and they are a lot darker in some cases, along with being a lot longer of reads. They are all part of series, so if you like the first one, there's more to read. But kicking it off, we have Red Rising. I talked about Ender's Game and Dune earlier, and this is like the perfected child of those books. Holy crap, is this series amazing and metal as hell for a young man to read. It centers around Darrow of Lycos. He is a miner in the depths of Mars. Earth and humanity has expanded to encompass the solar system. There is now a pyramid of superiority among humanity, with reds at the bottom and golds at the top. And guess what? Darrow is a red. This is a story not only about revenge, justice, revolution, and becoming a man, but also one that teaches the follies of your actions later in the series. Darrow commits a lot of heinous acts in a technically justified way, but he then has to deal with the consequences of his actions later in the series. One of the most compelling main characters, along with world in general. They take the Roman aesthetic, names and all of that with the caste system and supplant it into a solar system-wide Game of Thrones epic. My God, I am so glad I discovered this series last year. And as you'll see is a trend among all of these books, the main character is just so goddamn cool. And that is no exception for the Reaper of Mars. That's what I'm saying when these stories inspire, of you can kind of place yourselves in their shoes. You can see what they're going through, and it's an embodiment of what you could potentially do yourself, good and bad, and you learn the lessons of either A, how to go about it the right way, or B, learn from the follies that these characters go through. But next up, in a completely different setting, we have The Lies of Loch Lamora. In a Victorian England-esque world, this man is a con artist. Using his brains instead of the brawn, it is his goal to scheme as much money out of the wealthy in his city. And you know those moments in life where everything is snowballing and you're barely managing to pick up the pieces in time and hold everything together as more and more is piled onto your plate? Yeah, this book is the epitome of digging yourself too deep and having to find a way out of it, all while being extremely funny and uniquely scratching that itch to make a shit ton of money that young men have, instead of the one to be a complete and utter badass like Red Rising. This one is quite a unique book. It has 2 more in the series, but they just weren't as good. They're still pretty decent, but I would say this is a masterpiece. But now we're on to the thick boys, starting off with The Name of the Wind. I kind of lied about Lies of Lamora. The main character, Quoth, here also solves a lot of problems using his ingenuity and charisma. This is showing that the soft touch is just as powerful as the sword. If you have read a bunch of fantasy and are kind of sick and tired of characters solving things by just beating the shit out of it, I would highly recommend going with The Name of the Wind. But it also teaches you how to deal with arrogance and overconfidence. Quoth is very good at pretty much anything he does, but that does not make him the exception to life. He fucks up. And he then has to deal with the consequences in a lot of scenarios. And going through this book, you can see where arrogance and overconfidence can get you, not only in the good of believing in yourself and your capabilities, but also in the bad of overextending and exerting yourself in certain scenarios. Fair warning though, if you fall in love with this book, there's only a second one out and fans have been waiting for years for the 3rd one. Now we're on to the really thick boys with the Stormlight Archive, the first book being The Way of Kings. God damn, is this world so cool. Brandon Sanderson is one of my favorite authors working today, and I think that goes for pretty much any fantasy fan, mainly because of the unique worlds and characters he puts together. The ensemble cast of the Stormlight Archive goes through so many themes and character arcs, but by far my favorite one is accepting who you are, your past and what you've done, and moving forward to be better from it. Multiple characters go through this in different ways, and it's incorporated into the magic system and general lore of the world in such an interesting fashion. Each of these books has a flashback sequence for a certain character, fleshing out their past while they go through current struggles that relate in the present. And my God, does it pull at the heartstrings when you see exactly how past events and who they were can impact their current choices. This book taught me a lot about letting go of the past and just accepting it, not forgetting it, but understanding that you can do better from today onwards. Even if you hate yourself and the world around you, you still go about your day and complete tasks, even if it is in emotional agony. This book addresses what that feels like and gives you a world into disliking the situation you are in and the past that you have, but then working towards a better future. And finally, to no one's surprise, we have The Wheel of Time, and the first book, The Eye of the World. The Eye of the World's a pretty decent book, but the majority of the story and the big commitment here comes in the other 13 books. Technically 14 if you want to read the prequel, but we're focusing in on our main characters and more specifically our boy Rand al'Thor. These books are what inspired me to start this YouTube channel in the first place. If you go back to the first videos, it's Wheel of Time reviews. I don't think you understand how much this story impacted my life. In this story, the Chosen One trope is turned on its head. The Chosen One doesn't really want to be the chosen one because he's also destined to die. So when it comes to your own life, this is fighting against fate, both in a good and bad way. Not only are you destined for more than you currently are at, and that's why you're on your self-improvement journey, but also fighting against the expectations and the wants of others. This is your life to live, so you should determine how you live it. I love Wheel of Time, and I cannot wait for a time when I've forgotten a lot of it so I can reread it with this experience. The impact that not only Rand al'Thor, but the entire other cast of main characters and side characters had on me. This is an entire realized world, more deep than pretty much anything else I've read, and more motivational than pretty much anything else I've read. I can't say enough. I just say get through the first 4 books. I know that's a lot to ask, and you will be hooked and life changed. There's also a unique take on the trope of never giving up. In this story, time is on a wheel. Get it? Haha, wheel of time. And the bad guys get an attempt to destroy the world and the universe each and every turn of the wheel. So inevitably, they will win. But that's the thing, is our characters still have to fight because they have to save their reality and the future realities. So even if death is inevitable, which is the parallel to draw, are you going to give up on this one life that you have to live? And are you going to have less for the future generations, your children? Wheel of Time has a billion more lessons and nuances within it, but those are some of the most relevant to your self-improvement journey. Please give it a shot at least once in your life, and also let me know what fiction series have impacted you the most down in the comment section below. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching and see ya.